November 27th, 2017. Welcome to this meeting of the Princeton Council. And Madam Clerk, have we met all the noticing requirements for this meeting?
We have, Mayor.
And please call the roll.
Ms. Howard? Here. Mr. Liverman? Here. Mr. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Crum Miller?
Here.
Ms. Butler?
Here.
Mr. Quinn?
Here.
And I'm here too.
Mayor
right.
Lippert.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll start our meeting tonight with announcements, and I'll start on my right with Ms. Howard. Any announcements? Mr. Liverman? Mr. Miller, any announcements? Ms. Crumiller?
Nope.
Ms. Butler?
No.
Mr. Quinn, any announcements? Okay, I just had a few announcements. The first is that tomorrow there's going to be a rally in support of DACA, and that's going to be on Heinz Plaza starting at noon. At noon, okay. So everybody's invited to that. Also, on Wednesday evening here in this room, starting at 7 p.m., there's going to be a public hearing for the transfer of Herrontown Woods. And this is a transfer from Mercer County to the municipality. And this is just, the public hearing is required as part of the process. And then final announcement is I just sent, Ms. Crumler and I just sent a letter to the editor to Town Topics announcing a call for applications for our boards, committees, and commissions. So we know there's going to be at least a few openings starting in January because two of our best volunteers, David Cohen and Leticia Fraga, are now moving from civilian status to members of council. So they'll be leaving their seats. And there's also just through just your yearly attrition too, there might be some other spots open. So we always encourage folks to apply. The application is available up on the website. So I just wanted to put in a plug for that too. Are there any announcements from staff? Mr. Shield? Okay. All right, then we'll move on to approval of the minutes. There are two sets of minutes on the agenda for tonight. The first is from October 18th, 2017.
I'll move it.
Moved by Ms. Crumler, seconded by Mr. Miller. Any other questions?
You're moving in block. You're moving both of them.
I will, yeah.
I think
You wanna move
everybody was
block them?
there.
Okay.
And, yeah.
So moving the minutes of October 18th and October 24th, moved by Ms. Crumler and seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those minutes passed unanimously. And next we come to the proclamation for Communities of Light. And is there anybody here for that proclamation tonight? No, okay. So I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but I encourage you to look at it as it's part of the agenda materials. This is an annual event in support of Women's Space, and it's going to be on December 4th this year. We're encouraging everybody to participate as they're able. And next we come to the part of the agenda for public comment. I forgot to pick up the sheet. I'm not sure if anybody signed. Did anybody sign already? But I would just, if you just come up and, sure, thank you. So you must be Harold Cuskin. Go ahead. Yeah, is your microphone on? Can you tap it to see if it's on? It's on here. For the record, okay.
Is that
Now it works, yeah. And could you just start over with your names
Okay.
for the record?
My name is Harold Cuskin. I live at 1 Governor's Lane, and I'm here to address a parking problem. I audit courses at the university, and I have occasion to come into town around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I've tried to park on Van Deventer Street, And on several occasions over the past few weeks, I've found that about 10 or 12 parking spaces, starting at Wiggins and running towards Nassau, have blue hoods over them, which say no parking for the funeral home, Mather Hodge. I don't understand why a private enterprise has the right to prohibit me from parking in public parking spaces. It seems to me that that's inappropriate and improper for at least 3 reasons. One is it's discriminatory against other businesses, which I am sure would love to take 10 or 12 parking spaces on Nassau Street and reserve them for their customers whenever they think it's necessary. Second, as a taxpayer, I think I have a right to use public parking spaces. And third, it's depriving the borough of the revenue, or the town, sorry, of the revenue from those parking spaces. I spoke to Mr. Miller about this. He wasn't able to get a satisfactory explanation of why this practice goes on, but we have a private business excluding the public from public parking spaces, and I urge you to look into that situation.
Okay, thank you. I know that Mr. Miller did bring it up to council, and we have a group of, and I'm trying to remember who volunteered to be on the group. It's Mr. Miller, Ms. Cromiller, and Tim, did you volunteer too? Mr. Quinn are going to just review the policy and make sure that we that we have something that is in writing and that we've gone through a process for. So
It's a long-standing arrangement, and we have a few things like that you brought to our attention, but it has been an arrangement for decades with that funeral home. So, and
Well,
we also do it for a few other churches for funerals.
Well, churches, I think, are different from private businesses. But the fact that it's been a long-standing practice doesn't preclude you from reviewing it and perhaps
That's right,
changing
yes.
it.
And we are going to review it and put it in writing and discuss it at a public meeting.
Thank you.
and Kip.
Hi, I'm Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey, and I think you have my handout. I've changed what I plan to say tonight to talk about the freebie. The schedule that I just handed out to you is the new proposed schedule. That's page number 1. I recommend more discussion about this schedule among staff before it is posted and implemented. Page 1, as I said, is the new schedule. If you have any trouble understanding this schedule at a glance, join the rest of us. It's very difficult to figure out. Page 2 is the schedule marked up. Focusing on just the freebie going back to the shopping center at night, I've marked the bus that is repeated, so that it's listed twice on the schedule. A third freebie just goes to Elm Court and then back to the station, and I'm not sure why. But in the end, there are only 2 buses to the shopping center. Now, if you look at page 3, I've translated the schedule to something that's readable. You see the 2 freebies going home from the station. One is at 6:12, and the other one is at 7:31. That's it. At the hearing you held on October 23rd, there were several people, including one of the bus drivers, who said that the 525 gets a lot of use and is needed and should be saved. And I would wager also that the future ridership will be growing on this trip. So page 4, as you can see, is the existing schedule. And that one has a lot more freebie buses on it. You see the 2 freebie buses going home, but you also have an additional 6 more going home to Harrison Street. Under the new schedule, the so-called January 2 schedule, we have just 2 buses. So we go from 8 to 2. Just the 612, and if you are coming to in on the Dinky and normally take the 525, you've got quite a wait. And then everyone else has to make it to the 745. If you don't make the 745, you're out of luck. Whereas right now, there are 3 more buses that you can catch if you're late beyond 745. Bottom line, it looks like freebie service at night has been cut to ribbons. We have 3 buses in the morning, but just 2 at night. This leaves commuters, such as those who appeared at the council's hearing in October, in bad shape. My colleague, John Kilbride, who retired from Amtrak and has experience in developing schedules, has found some extra time in the schedule that he thinks might allow us to save the 525. What we'd like to do is put the January 2 schedule on hold and sit down with Jack West and John Mayer Brown and discuss with them how we can respond better to the concerns expressed at the council hearing. We also would like to have Ted Moss, the bus driver, be involved in the discussion because of his expertise. My recollection from the hearing, which isn't perfect, but my recollection is that at the hearing, the mayor specifically said that Mr. Moss should be involved in future changes to the schedule. Finally, for a moment, I want to talk about the future. Consider that Princeton will be required to put in something like 400 to 600 affordable housing units. You know better the number than I do. These residents, many of them new, will need public transportation. We hope you will take our expertise and concerns seriously. We're available to meet any time this week. The sooner the better. Thanks, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I was going to give a report about this, but I'll tell you now that I'm the liaison to the Public Transportation Committee, which has been looking at this schedule for months, and we've looked over, Kip has attended our meetings, and we've looked over the schedule, and I know at the last meeting we asked if you would make the decision about the daytime dinky ride, and the committee met and decided to eliminate that. And they also decided to go ahead with this schedule. It was basically this schedule, I think it was tweaked a little further by our consultant who are examining ridership numbers and basing the schedule on actual ridership numbers. So it's tough because some people, are going to probably lose the ride that they're used to, but we're hoping that more people will be able to ride it, and that's when you change a bus schedule, that always happens. But you have to really base it on data, and that's what we're doing. And I think the consultant did a pretty good job of doing the best job possible of using one bus to go around town in a little over an hour to the most possible. To collect the most possible numbers of people who need the rides. And it has turned out that the people who need the rides are people who don't have cars, who live in some of our affordable housing neighborhoods. And the mayor and I rode the freebie just to see what it was like. And, there were a lot of people getting on it in those places. And those are the people who really, the committee has decided that since those people are using it, we want to expand it for a place where there's a real need for it, and that's where we see the need. And that's why we're expanding that service and slightly constricting the commuter service. We also plan on rolling it out on January 2nd and doing, in the next couple weeks, doing a publicity blitz and getting word out to the people who are riding the bus now who might be affected. So we are committed to doing, the committee is committed to doing as best they can to get the word out. So all of you, if you know anyone who rides it in the morning or in the evening, those are the people who are going to be affected. The people who are riding it during the day shouldn't be affected too much. So I'm sorry, Kip. I'm sorry,
I'm not going to give up on this one because I think you're really missing something, so I'm going to keep going. But I don't think you took into account anything Mr. Moss said, and I don't think there's been any meeting with him since it was said at the hearing that he would be involved. So I'd like to see another look at this because I don't think people really understand the schedule. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Ms. Beller.
Yes, I want to comment on that. I really want to thank you. This is tedious work, and I want you to know that we appreciate it and thank the committee on our behalf. So I do appreciate that you've looked at this, and I'll trust that if you've looked at the data, the correct decision was made. I'm sure Mr. Moss is a very good bus driver, but I know you've also had experts to look at this schedule, and I think that that's what we ought to rely upon. I don't think anyone committed to having the bus driver back to make the schedule. Having said that, I do think Kip has a point about the readability of this schedule, and if there is anything that can be done to make this more user-friendly, that would be terrific.
Yes, I agree. The ultimate schedule that's published, I hope will be, the ones that we use right now are a lot bigger and easier to read, and so I'm assuming that it's Mercer, Greater Mercer TMA is doing the schedule and the graphics and things like that, so they do a pretty good job. But thank you. I will double check that the schedule is readable, because I agree with you that it is really hard to read.
Yeah, even I have to take off my glasses to see the print's a little small. I'm not sure if this was shrunken down.
This wasn't is this what's on the website right now? I don't know if it's been put on the website, but I'll.
I think it was sent to me by email.
Okay, so this was just a draft for purposes of looking at the schedule, not for the public, but we will definitely make it more readable.
And I do just want, as a coda to Jenny's report, I know we talk a lot about the freebie and what a great service it was, but going on, we rode the whole entire loop, and it just reminded me what a really wonderful service the freebie is, and it was just, I encourage everybody to ride it. It's more than just a bus. It is like you can feel the community as people get on and off, and it was just it's a really, really great sort of slice of Princeton where people of all ages. I think we had a very young rider and some elderly riders, and it was really terrific. So I also want to extend my thanks to the committee and to everybody who came before us who helped put this service into existence. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on items that are not already on the agenda? Okay, seeing no one, we'll move on to reports. And the first report tonight is a police report from Chief Sutter.
Thank you, Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted two quick highlights, actually 3 highlights from the report. You'll notice that motor vehicle stops continue to increase as compared to last year, 2016. And please make specific note that speeding enforcement is up significantly, and that's in direct response to citizen complaints that we're getting. And
To Jenny.
so we want to highlight that we're being responsive to that.
Yay!
You'll also notice under ordinances a significant spike in overweight vehicle enforcement. That's also in direct response to complaints of weight limit complaints from residents that overweight trucks are transversing our local roads. So we've put that on traffic's radar, if you will, to make sure that they're being enforced. So that enforcement, it's something we always do, but it seemed that we've had a spike in complaints over the last couple months, so we've paid a lot of attention to that. I think a lot of that had to do with the detour of 206 as well. So that's part of it, but it's a complaint that we do get kind of frequently. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight and commend our officers and Ms. Deanna Stockton on their work in the Street Smart grant campaign. And I just, enforcement isn't everything and numbers aren't everything, but I wanted to share some numbers with you that illustrate some really good work that was done. There were 2 details completed, one in the spring and then one in October. And it was a total of 174 hours of police officer time dedicated to education and enforcement through the grant. That resulted in a total of 8,000 contacts with pedestrians, pedicyclists, and motorists. 7,000 pieces of educational literature were handed out to people, which is really tremendous to raise awareness of our rules and regulations with regard to pedestrian and motorist safety. A total of 200 summonses were issued. 46 of those were to motorists for failing to yield to pedestrian and crosswalks, mostly in that Nassau Street corridor there. And 50 were for the use of cell phones by motorists. And finally, 86 warnings were given to bicyclists for a combination of helmet use, riding on sidewalks where prohibited, and for illegally using the sidewalk, the crosswalk with a bicycle. And that's very important because they're all warnings, and that's really what I look at as a positive contact where an officer engages the bicyclist with a warning and some instruction. But we get a lot of complaints about that, and there's a perception that we don't pay a lot of attention to it. We actually do, but a lot of it may go unnoticed because they're more informal contacts between an officer walking down the sidewalk, seeing the violation, and maybe talking to a juvenile or somebody that's in violation. But they were documented during this campaign, so I just want to get out to the public that we're paying attention to it, and it's a problem that we hear about a lot, and we pay attention to that. And that's all I have to highlight. If there's
Great.
any questions.
Thanks. Yeah, Ms. Howard?
I do, a few. I'll start there with thanks that this police report continues to evolve, and I think we see some new components in this version, so thank you. And you're upping your technology game, too. I filled out a vacant house check form, or maybe I haven't traveled in a while, and I don't know if any of my colleagues have done that. It's all fancy now. It's very
Vacant
easy
house?
to submit. Yeah. The vacant house check form used to be, seemed old school. It was electronic, but old school, and it's, I don't, what did you do?
It's the seamless docs is what we're using now for that, so it's.
Say thank you, Jenny and Liz and
They're going to
Mark
be
and-
our new website provider as
Okay.
well, so everything will be seamlessly.
Okay, well,
And
yeah.
I think it's increasing the use as well. I think a lot more people are using it, and we're getting more than we have in the past.
Oh, that's great. Well, it was very easy to navigate. Also, thank you for your mentioning all the traffic work. I know a lot of your staff have been involved in redirecting and refiguring out all the traffic at PHS drop-off. I don't know if
Yes.
you've had that, and that seems to be going much better. I know. I saw poor Lieutenant Moore there several days in a row,
Yeah.
figuring it out. Yeah.
It's a difficult thing to manage, but I think with some of the things we have in place and some long-term strategies that Mr. Cochran has shared, I think it's going to make that a better situation there.
So one thing I noticed in both August and September were significant drops in animal complaints, and I'm wondering, so in August it was down year over year 71 to 42, and in September not as much, but 47 to 33. And I'm wondering if that has to do with us not having had an animal control officer, and if it's just a reminder that once we have somebody, we need to get him or her, I forget where we are in the status, out and more known to the public?
Yeah, that's a great question.
You know-
It could definitely have something to do with that from a proactive standpoint on work that gets recorded that would be done proactively by animal control.
That
'Cause I
people
can't
don't
really
think to call, or, yeah.
Yeah, have anything specifically that otherwise that would account for that.
And finally, just, we ask you every month, there's only one incident reported, but what can you tell us about the use of force and what we've learned from it? There was one in August and I think none in September.
Yeah, that particular one was a resisting arrest type of situation that was more of a
There were two people, it said.
yeah, it was more of a criminal type of thing than mental health crisis, as I've reported in the past. But one of the goals that I'm setting for 2018 that I was going to discuss at Public Safety this week, and I've discussed it in the past, I want to look at, we're doing a lot of training with crisis intervention, de-escalation, and that type of thing. But I also want to look at more proactively, which was in the 21st Century Policing Report, is less lethal options. You'll see just in the news today, NYPD released a video of a suicidal person that ended up turning on an officer and charging with a knife, and they had to use deadly force. The person survived, but we really need to start thinking in terms of less lethal options, and historically it's been very controversial. Some of the options that are available don't necessarily have the best type of reputations nationally. They're getting better. There's a lot of technology out there, and I think it's in our best interest with the amount of with the opioid crisis that lead to mental health issues in and of themselves. We're going to be, I think, seeing more and more of these types of incidents locally, and it's just something that I have on the agenda for 2018 to start examining and looking at.
Good. I'm glad that's on the agenda. And Joe, are you going to ask about the 14-year-old? You often do, so I was going to let you.
They were wild.
Okay, good. Thank you.
14-year-old boys. Oh, is your son
I've got
14?
one at home, as long as it's not mine.
No,
yeah.
I was wondering
No, I'm
about
not
that.
gonna ask.
So many kids.
No, I was just going to, Chief, there's a column that's called, and I always want to know, it's called Unwanted Person. And what is that? That's somebody that's not welcome to home, not welcome to...
You're not welcome here. It's a classification that can be several things. It could be something that results from it could be an argument at a home that doesn't arise to domestic violence, but it could be, there's a homeowner, a friend is over. I'm just giving you one scenario. Some type of dispute arises and the homeowner calls and says, I've asked this person to leave, they won't leave. And then we look at the legality of it and say, okay, either you have to leave or we figure the situation out. Another common one would be for disorderly persons in a public place. So maybe there's juveniles in a store creating, I'm just thinking of one off the top of my head, like the 7-Eleven, there were some juveniles in there using foul language, being a little rambunctious, and the store owner will call and ask to have them leave. Usually it's after somebody's been asked to leave somewhere and they don't. But we have to figure out when we get there the legal basis of it. So it just doesn't mean we can just remove anybody for any reason. After we figure out the reason, we take the appropriate action.
I want to follow up on that, Lance, because there is that, to me, it's a worrisome, but it's kind of, I know we've talked about it before, that there's nothing you can do, that sometimes citizens will call up and say, there's a person, there's a suspicious person, and they don't have any choice, even if they think there's no reason to check out that person, they don't have any choice, they have to check out the person.
Jenny, if I may, you're 100% correct, and very recently, we had an exact situation like that, without getting real specific. It was a call, someone reporting something like a car burglary, and we do have a lot of car burglaries going on. A car burglary, a break-in, and once we ended up getting there, literally in a matter of 30 seconds before a number of us even got to the call, the officer figured out that the person had literally seen a look-alike car, and I've done it. And you go to get in the car, and you're, oh, this isn't my car. It's great that somebody called, but it does create a situation where we have to stop somebody, and then that creates a whole nother set of circumstances. But we try to do it in a very inconspicuous and quickly and efficiently. But you're right, we do get those calls, and we're put in that situation where sometimes it ends up looking bad on us when we're responding to a call from someone.
I got in a car, it was unlocked, that looked just like mine. So it's like
Arrest her. Yeah, I was just going to comment on the 206, having been closed for so long. I do think that it has created a lot of different traffic patterns.
Okay.
I can hardly turn left off Hibben onto Mercer anymore because the traffic still, I think even with 206 open, it hasn't really reverted back, even though we've made it known. But I do think that that's also, in addition to the large trucks, it does seem to have made, this is anecdotal, but drivers do seem a little more aggressive than they were in the past, like racing to make lights, yellow lights. We haven't traditionally, the town hasn't been like that, but I think there are more people, I see it more trying to make turns. Also, do schools at the drop-off have signs that asking people to get off the cell phones? Do the public schools have that when you're in drop-off line? I've seen them around. I'll try to find an example of one. I've seen them in some of the independent schools that I serve. They've got, I think they're pretty effective when you're in that line telling people to get off their cell phones.
We've used our variable message boards. I don't know if you've seen that. We've used them for phones, so I agree with you 100%.
But I just think for schools to have that up on their property, telling people to get off their cell phones when they're in the parking lot and around kids can be pretty effective.
Or to use kids, too. I feel like our country made the most progress with smoking and seatbelts and recycling by telling kids about that. So, I don't know. I'm always shocked by how many parents you see talking on their cell phone while driving through a school zone to pick up their kids, because it's really dangerous. And, yeah, all right. Mr. Quinn?
Thanks, Mayor. Chief, we've been been following the juvenile reports all year, and the preponderance of 14-year-old boys involved in incidents has been a. I'd like, as a first year, coming to the end, and I know my new guy allotment of questions is running out quickly. Can you give me a sense of whether the number of juvenile reports in 2017 has been greater than usual? Has there been a spike in these incidents? I noticed in September there were fewer, but there seemed to be about more than half a dozen with station house adjustments and curbside warnings in August.
I have to say that, well, the summertime, we'll generally see a bit of a spike, which is common. Going short-term, and maybe I'm speaking more long-term in my perception without having the numbers in front of me, I've actually seen our incidents of juvenile crisis and other issues decrease. I feel like historically the issues were more serious, and I don't want to jinx our current predicament, but I think that education, our roles with the schools seem healthier now than they have been historically, and I'm hoping that is having a positive effect. I'm also aware of trends that happen for no reason, that just tend to go up and down. But to your point, August was a little heavy, and I think that has to do with the summer months, but I really do feel good about where we are with the youth locally, and that the incidents are really less serious than they have been historically.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask one more quick question? Why are we backed up on these getting August and September now?
We missed October. I missed my appearance in October, and I can't think off the top of my head as to why, but we're always a month behind. So I'm doing November's report, October's report now. It takes us that time to put the statistics together, compile the report, so we're normally about 20 to 30 days behind, and you get the report from the month before. But we're down one report because I wasn't here last month. That's why there's two.
Okay.
Anything else for the chief? Thank you so much. Okay, now we'll move on to ordinance introductions and. Oh, yes, thank you. I always forget that. All right. Okay, excellent. All right. So we'll start again on my right. Ms. Howard, do you have any reports?
None.
Mr. Liverman, any reports?
No, were you going to mention the mayor task force for teen stress? You
I
mention
can,
it?
yeah.
Okay.
Or do you want to talk about it?
Oh, that's fine.
All right.
Thanks.
Mr. Miller?
I have a report on our pending negotiations or coming negotiations with Princeton Community Television. As I'm sure all of us up here are aware, and our incoming members of council should be aware also, the current financial and operating agreement between Princeton Community Television, commonly called PCTV, and the municipality will end on the 31st of December of next year. Under the current agreement, PCTV operates the public access channels on both Comcast and Verizon cable TV networks that serve their Princeton subscribers. PCTV also broadcasts live through the cable TV providers and records the public meetings of the council, planning board, and zoning board. They also operate their own public channel that provides programming of public interest and entertainment to subscribers on the cable TV in Princeton. For this service, the municipality paid PCTV $242,000 in 2017, and under our current agreement is obligated to pay PCTV $232,000 in 2018. The funds paid to PCTV come from payments that the town receives in the form of franchise fees that are paid by the two cable TV providers. In 2017, the town received $315,000 in franchise fees from the two cable TV providers. We anticipate that the fees paid for 2018 will be paid for 2017 will be paid in January 2018 and will exceed the amount that the municipality is obligated to pay PCTV for 2018. At the direction of council, the administrator and I met with George McCullough, the PCTV station manager, on the 9th of November, and we set the framework for negotiations for a new financial and operating agreement. Specifically, PCTV was asked to provide two cost proposals. One proposal for only the services to be provided to the municipality, that's the three live broadcasts of meetings and recording of the meetings for public record. And the second for the programs of public interest and entertainment produced or otherwise broadcast by PCTV. We also made clear that council recognized that PCTV had successfully transitioned from a municipally operated entity to a separate 501c3, and that it was the intent of the municipality to disengage from any direct oversight through PCTV board participation other than financial oversight and through a liaison from council for the operation of PCTV. We expect that PCTV will provide us with a proposal in response to this request prior to the end of 2017, and council will then have the balance of 2018 to move ahead with negotiations and define a new agreement with PCTV, both financial and operating. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. Ms. Corbella?
I wanted to bring up something that's not actually a report, but I wanted to bring it to the council's attention, and that's that our sign ordinance, I don't know if you're all aware that it prohibits signs in the public right-of-way, and there are no signs allowed. And now, this election season, a lot of people put signs up in the rights-of-way, and I think our enforcement officer might have, well, I'm not sure why, but didn't want to start taking them down because it might seem like it was interfering or unfair if we did one and not another. And I wanted to see if we could figure out a way to get that ordinance. Well, for one thing, before the next election season, I think we should make people aware that they're not allowed to do it. But the other thing that I wanted to ask our administrator or the public works person is, can't we get more people to take down the signs of our, because right now, I think it's the engineering department that is in charge of enforcing it, right? Zoning, right. But it seems like, could we get a public works person who's like out and about anyway to do it?
It's funny you said that because they were doing that on Harrison Street. As they cut the lawns or the leaf, they will pick the signs up. So whenever they go to the site, they haven't picked the signs up. I've seen them do it twice now, the public works.
Well, that's great, because I thought it was kind of crazy, but I thought that before we took up a sign, we had to tell the person that we were doing it. Is that the case?
I don't think so.
I think what it has been is Derek will take the sign, but then he notifies them that he's taken the sign. I think he keeps them. That's been the issue. I think they get the signs back. Is the way it's worked. But I think you bring up a good point. You know, we had a resident in here several meetings ago who was complaining. In particular, he was complaining about the content of a particular sign, but some of those signs were not in the right-of-way. So it's not just a question of letting people know about the sign ordinance. It's also explaining what the right-of-way is, because sometimes people think it's on their personal property, but they're really in the right-of-way.
But I think I'm assuming what Mr. Crummell, you're more talking about what's in the median and what's in, not
Right.
somebody who's putting it on their lawn too close to the sidewalk.
I am. I mean, that's what, there was just, they were all over the, it just seemed like it's getting worse every year. I know when I first moved to Princeton, there was an unwritten law, an unwritten rule that we didn't have election signs, and everyone was proud of it. And now that's gone by the wayside, and in a way, I kind of wish we would bring it back,
Well, you know,
because they're so,
in part, it's sign creep. I mean, I hate to sound like my mother, but if you let one person get away with it, then
right, that's
signs
what I'm
beget
talking
signs.
about.
I would recommend that Ms. Crumler puts a note in her calendar for September, maybe for the primary, if we have an active primary, and then at least we can contact all the campaigns. But I see it more that the campaigns go out there, and then the businesses go out there, and the nonprofits go out there, and
They
you
all
have
do.
everybody, so.
And even some of the candidates have not picked up their signs. They're
Right.
still floating around.
Well, why don't we do a PSA for that right now, where if you've won, then it's your responsibility to take your sign down. And if you didn't win and want to run again, it's nice to show that you're a good citizen and clean up after yourself. So please get out there and clean up your signs. Okay, Ms. Fettler, did you have any reports?
I have sort of a lengthy one, so just hang on. First, so I have a report from Rec. Dillon basketball begins this Saturday, December 2nd at Dillon. But after December 2nd, the games will be played weeknights at the public school gyms through mid-January because Princeton University is having the Dillon gym floors refinished. So team practices will begin Monday, December 4th at JW Middle School. I'm counting on you when you meet with President Eisgruber in January. He's a big supporter of the Dillon program, but we've had trouble getting students to coach those teams. Evan and others have really had to recruit a lot harder, but also getting the space at Dillon Gym has been more of a challenge. The Longwood Garden bus trip will take place on December 5th. It's sold out. That's good news. There's still a handful of youth squash program, begins January 1, and folks can contact the rec department either on the website or call to register. The ice skating flags are going up this week. Obviously, the red flag, yes, they're going up. You never know, it can turn on a dime. Obviously, red flag means it's not safe. White means it's safe to skate. We're not anywhere close yet, but they should check the rec website or social media for the updates once it gets colder. And they are going to be installing turf blankets on selected athletic fields this week to protect them through the winter and promote early growth in spring of 18. Next, I want to congratulate Ben Stenz and Evan Moorhead on their induction into the Princeton High School Hall of Fame as part of the recognition of the 1992-94 boys basketball team. Those teams captured 3 consecutive Central Jersey Group II championships during this span and set records for the most wins in a single season. Evan is the chair of the Hall of Fame committee, and Ben was the captain of that team, so they both had major roles that evening. And I understand that Ben brought the house down with a story. Have you heard this story? He told a tale on his wife, with her permission, if you know the difference between Pete Carrill and Pete Carroll, you might want to ask him about that story. Pete Carrill was in attendance that night. So it was a big night for both of them. I also want to announce that the Rec Commission approved an increase in the minimum wage for their hires that is in keeping with the change in the state's minimum wage that is expected to go into effect on January 1st. You may recall that they did this a couple of years ago where they took kind of a significant jump so they weren't having to raise it every year. So this year they are going from, the New Jersey minimum wage will go from $8.44 an hour, or it will be it was $8.44. It will be increased to $8.60 per hour. And so the Recreation Commission will approve a minimum wage of $8.75, and for most starting salaries, their minimum wage, but the pool lifeguards get $9.25 in recognition of their increased certification and responsibility. And they've always tried to keep a step system in place there, so the returning lifeguards, instead of getting a 25-cent raise, will get a 50-cent raise. So it ends up being kind of a significant cost to the Recreation Department operation, costing about $4,500 from this year to next year. But, you know, over the years, the life of the pool, it's already been a significant increase.
Joe, can I jump in and ask
Yeah,
a question?
yep.
So thank you. That's a great update, and I think that's the right thing to do, and to invest in the workers. I assume most of them are Princeton residents, right?
Yep.
Live in the community, and that's great. Has it come up, our governor-elect ran on raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So, like, has that come up in rec? I mean, hearing you say this, and then hearing that we're still sub $9, had a plan for what happens if the state changes it, which I hope they do, but we know what that means, because that's a big change then, if we're still sub 9.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, it is a
Yeah.
big, it will be a big change. And that's one reason why I brought it up, is to show you how directly this impacts our bottom line. And rec has absorbed some of these increases year after year. But the other thing they did at this meeting was acknowledge the payment of the $75,000 that the rec department pays every year to the municipality in payment of support of the pool complex. So we've got another 14 years to go on that annual payment. And what we've seen over the life of the pool is that if we don't keep it up and reinvest, we will see declining attendance at the pool. So it's a delicate balance. One of the things I think that is, Ben shared an article with me. I think there's a county in New Jersey that's gone to 15. Maybe it's Bergen. But they have exempted part-time workers. So these are high school and college kids, mostly. I know when we were talking about earned sick leave, there were those who made the argument that there are families who depend upon this. But in our case, the summer employment, you know, may be a different category. But if this happens, the only way to protect the revenue that supports all of the other rec programs will be to raise the rates at the pool. So it's a pretty simple equation.
Thanks.
But thanks. Yes, so they are thinking about it. They're fearful, really. I mean, it will impact the whole operation. Yeah, so I think that was it on the fees. I also want to announce that in accordance with our Parks and Recreation ordinance, the Recreation Commission approved a 3-year appointment of Ben Stenz as the Director of Recreation. Ben's fine work generally speaks for itself, but I would be remiss if I didn't use this chance to express my extreme gratitude for the opportunity to work with such a great team as the Recreation staff and the Commission. In no small measure, a great deal of the success of that team rests with Ben's leadership. He leads by example. He doesn't ask anyone to do anything he wouldn't do, or he hasn't done at some point in the past. No one outworks him. No one puts in more hours. He is honest and trustworthy. He is an excellent communicator, whether he's communicating with staff, the Commission, residents, or our community partners. He is focused on the work and making recreation the best department it can be for the residents of Princeton. The Recreation Department touches thousands of Princeton lives every year, and the town should take great pride that we have such a fine department representing us. They aren't perfect, of course, but the great thing about the department is that they never stop trying to get better. In addition to setting high expectations for his team, Ben is also a master at recognizing and celebrating good work. He gives a lot of thought as to how he can motivate folks even when the tasks become routine or mundane. He has earned the loyalty and devotion from both the staff and the Commission. Back when the Commission was selecting a successor for Jack Roberts, Ben wasn't necessarily the heir apparent. The Commission saw and believed in Ben's potential, and it has paid off. They showed their good judgment once again when they reappointed him for another 3-year term. And I want to mention, oh, the guy doesn't quit. He's taking his vacation. He's taking a week of his vacation beginning this Thursday to serve as a chaperone with the PHS studio band. It's a trip to Europe, but nonetheless, it is his vacation, and it probably involves 14-year-old boys, so that we know that it's a dangerous assignment, perhaps. Anyway, I want to congratulate Ben, and that's it.
Here, here. I'll add congratulate. Please share our congratulations. That's great, great news.
And I'll add to that, too. Jack Roberts was a hard act to follow, but I think Ben has moved the bar up, and he's done a wonderful job. And I think he is deserving of being reappointed, and deserving of all the praise that you read out for him.
Thank you.
Well, I have skimpy reports to follow that. Well said, Ms. Butler, about Mr. Stenson. Please extend my congratulations. Quick reports. The Princeton Environmental Commission invited Ed Trisselli of Princeton Community Housing to its November 8th meeting to review best practices in infusing sustainability into the construction of affordable housing. The commission didn't discuss specifics about PCH's project up at Princeton Community Village, but it was the beginning of a constructive dialogue about ways that sustainability and affordability don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. And so I think the commission deserves a shout out for being proactive in this, and Mr. Trisselli also for being receptive to this dialogue. The Civil Rights Commission met on November 21st, and Philip E. Freeman, Assistant Director, Bureau of Prevention, Outreach, and Public Education for the State Division of Civil Rights, attended. Mr. Freeman reviewed the division's work in employment, housing, and disability discrimination, and bias-based bullying in public schools. He recommended that Princeton Civil Rights Commission join the New Jersey Human Relations Council, and I think the commissioners found his presentation very helpful and will be following up with the division on training and educational opportunities. Finally, I had the great pleasure of attending 2 of the 3 days of the New Jersey League of Municipalities Conference in Atlantic City on November 15th and 16th. I attended sessions on affordable housing, sustainability and public engagement, the Open Public Records Act, energy efficiency and smart street lighting, and a really great panel featuring former New Jersey governors. Anticipating Councilwoman Butler's question, the Oprah session was confined to reviewing recent decisions and procedures and did not discuss pending litigation. But there's pending legislation. We covered litigation. And those recent decisions are available on the League's website, and I would urge all of my colleagues to review them. As a new member of council, I found the conference very helpful, and I was happy to see many of our professionals there attending sessions to complete their certifications. If my schedule permits, I intend to attend next year, and would just pass on to my future colleagues that it is very worthwhile as a new member of council. Being a rookie among veterans, I was the only member of council to attend, but found it very helpful. So thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Let's see. I have a few reports tonight. I also attended the conference of the League, and I chaired a panel on stormwater management, of which Bob Huff sat at the very back corner. that was a secret star of the panel. And there was a lot of interest in our I&I program, and also afterwards, several of the people who were there came up to me and were interested in our stormwater ordinance and really impressed with the work that Princeton is doing. So it was it was fun to have Princeton be out as a model on stormwater management. I also attended some really interesting sessions. One was on the sharing economy. Asbury Park is sort of on the forefront of dealing with the short-term housing rentals, so Airbnb, and there's some other companies too. A lot of communities now are struggling with this, and nobody seems to have exactly the right answer to it. And then I also attended a program on microgrids. Something that Mr. Miller has tried to do some legwork on. And there's a few communities who've gotten grants who are sort of taking the first step in this. So it's creating like a power grid that can either be on the main grid or you can pull it off the grid, and it essentially helps provide emergency power. So there's certainly areas in town where that might be a useful thing for us to do. The big issue now is just the economic feasibility and making sure that there's funding in place that makes it worthwhile. And then Tim and I attended a session on these smart streetlights, so converting streetlights to LEDs. And apparently the big challenge for a place like Princeton is that PSE&G does not have a favorable tariff for LED lights. So I learned a lot about tariffs, and this is how the power company
Tariff
charges
meaning like,
essentially.
in like the Tea Party tariff? Or what?
No, it's essentially what they can charge if the company owns the street light, what they can charge for the power. And so if they don't have anything special for LED, you're just paying for the power no matter what. And then financially it doesn't make sense. Or if it's not really capturing the energy savings, the pricing doesn't capture the energy savings, then again, it just doesn't make financial sense. So maybe it's something that the new governor can help with. And other states have been much more successful in converting to LED and seeing the financial benefits of it. And this is one of the areas where, I don't know if it was JP&L or it was like Atlantic County had a special.
Yeah, Atlantic City Electric.
The Atlantic City Electric seemed to be on the forefront of this too, and so a lot of the progress in New Jersey were for communities who were on that system. And then also Princeton was officially recognized by Sustainable Jersey for silver status, and we are the third municipality in the state rankings in terms of our number of sustainability points. So it was nice to get that recognition too. And I wanted to follow up on Mr. Miller's report about Princeton Community TV and just ask council, is this a commission where we want to continue to have a liaison from council, or does it make sense to go back to PCTV and talk about maybe not having a member of council, but treating them as a separate nonprofit? And I do think that there's something to be said for that, especially if we're going to be entering into a phase of negotiations with them.
Well, I think that we did that, but I couldn't find the documentation. But I asked Patrick if he remembered, and he thought we did already take, that we decided we were only going to have the cable TV committee come into existence when it needs to negotiate the franchise, and that we weren't going to have any members on the TV 30 board.
I think that we're pretty much in agreement that we do not want to have members of council sitting on the PCTV board as voting members. That has struck me as being potentially a conflict of interest, and it's something that we ought to get away from. What was called the Cable TV Committee was the committee that served a very different purpose than PCTV. It came into being when we created a public educational and governmental channels in Princeton as a committee that provided oversight over the operating entity for the channels, which at that time was a municipal department that did it. And it was administered by the borough, and there was a committee that essentially sat over the operation of what became PCTV, and at that point it was simply TV30. Where we are now, and I've done the same search that you've done, Jenny, and I can't find a record of saying that, a written record saying that we no longer want to have representation on the PCTV board. And when I referred to operating agreement between the town and PCTV, that is specifically what I was referring to, and I think that is what needs change. As far as liaison is concerned, the mayor is correct. We don't have a liaison with the Senior Resource Center. We don't have we have a liaison, a statutory liaison with the library. We have a liaison with the fire department. So there is a bit of a pattern, but no real set pattern for how it's done. I would think that the most we ought to have is a liaison. And if we don't have a liaison, PCTV wanted to be an independent 501c3. They are an independent 501c3, and they can operate without a liaison. With the only oversight that we provide is providing the funds as council determines necessary for the operation of PCTV.
Okay. I want to, Bernie has been so thoughtful at this, and in his responsibilities as the council liaison, and Jenny, I know you were at some point as well, have history here, so appreciate their service, but I agree now that it makes sense to move away from that model, and it may be worth rethinking. I mean, it's interesting, we don't even have a council liaison, for example, to the Senior Resource Center, yet we have a fairly substantial municipal financial engagement in the Senior Resource Center. So we're not fully aligned in terms of where the municipality is investing and where our engagement and oversight is. And so maybe as we redo this one, that I would put that on the table as one where we may need a more direct line. And I'm not sure exactly what format, and I defer to the lawyers exactly how to do that. But it seems like as we rethink as we rethink one where the relationship has evolved in such a way that it makes sense to change, I would put on the table that there may be another area where it's evolved. Bernie, you've ended up doing it informally and done it very well, but I think, I'd love to hear whether you think we should formalize it.
I was searching for another organization that is funded to a great extent, to an extent by the municipality where we do not have a liaison, and that's PFARS. There's no liaison with PFARS. There's no liaison with the Senior Resource Center. There's a liaison with the fire department, and as I said, statutory liaison with the library. So I think the area, as Heather says, the area deserves a look in total to decide what and how we want to do it.
Okay, thank you. And then just finally, I was going to report on the task force that's working on teen stress and community response to that. So Lance and I were at a meeting this morning with some members of the Youth Advisory Committee, Gary de Blasio, Trinity Counseling, Gary Snyder, principal of Princeton High School, PDS. And so anyway, we're now working towards putting together a summit in the fall, but also with the recognition that definitely there's kids who are feeling pressure right now, so trying to do some things in the interim. So One thing we're going to work on is to put together just a curated list of resources, so articles, books, other things that parents might want to read, put that up on the website and get some information about that out to parents to help give parents support in helping out their teenagers. Did either of you have something to add on the PCTV thing? No, okay. All right. Are there any other staff reports? No? Okay.
You know, I just checked the bylaws because I did remember that for the PCTV, and we are not required to have a member of council on their committee. We're required to appoint 3 citizens, and they can be municipal employees or elected officials, but they don't have to be.
Okay. Well, we may want to talk to them too about should we be, I think that's in their bylaws, right? But should we have that relationship where the municipality, where the governing body is appointing members of their board?
Yeah.
Because I don't think we do that for, the library, I feel like is a special case, but there's not really anybody else where we're appointing their board.
I do think we need, it is a little bit different, I think, because we give them all of their money. Like the other entities raise a lot of their own money, and they don't. I mean, it's the money that comes in
Okay,
from the
yes.
cable money, but.
Hold on.
The comment I would make is probably the way to have the oversight would be we need to develop a contract that really spells out what our expectations are for this group, senior services, all of those, and that's your mechanism for oversight versus having someone on the boards.
Okay. Any other comments before we move on? Okay. So now we will move on to ordinance introductions, and the first ordinance introduction is 2017-59, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton repealing certain Board of Health provisions of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. This is part of the code consolidation effort.
I'll move it because it's just removing something that's already covered by the state, right?
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Liverman. Is there any discussion on the introduction of this ordinance? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Krummeller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
So the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on December 18th, 2017. Next is 2017-60, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating towing and amending the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Mr. Miller?
I'll move this, and I'll just, it's basically taking out borough and township. There's very little change in it.
Okay.
There's a little bit of change, but not much.
So it's been moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion or questions? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Krummeller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on December 18th, 2017. Next is 2017-61, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating water and sewers and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Is there, Ms. Krummeller?
I'll move this too, and I think it does have some changes. I don't know, but not many. So, and I approve of it, just in case.
I'll second.
Because I'm on the sewer operating committee.
I'll second it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I did want to
you
bring up
second?
something in it that we've talked about a little bit at the sewer operating committee about doing a white paper on sewers, because I don't know if you noticed in here that it's against the ordinance to put down fat down your drain. And I just think most people don't know that. Did you know that it's against the ordinance?
No, well, I know you shouldn't do it just so you don't have to call Roto-Rooter, but
So what?
you don't have to do it so you don't have to call Roto-Rooter. But
Right,
I
but,
agree.
but it's really damaging to the sewer system, and it
Yes.
causes backups. And restaurants are aware of it because there's enforcement of restaurants, but people in their houses don't even know that. You're also not allowed to put feathers, and some other funny things that are in this ordinance. You're not allowed to put gas and oil, just,
Paint.
so I was
Paint.
thinking,
You don't want to dump paint down the
right,
drain.
so I'd like to do some kind of publicity to our residents, because I think they don't know that, and it is very bad for the environment.
Well, if the sewer
Jenny,
operating
that
committee.
ties back to sustainability, because if you have cooking fat that you want to get rid of, it should go in with the organics, and
Yes.
be processed as part of our sustainability effort. The absolute worst thing you can do as far as the homeowner is concerned is to put fat down their drain.
I would recommend if the sewer operating committee wanted to put together some just short social media posts and prepare them and then get them to Access Princeton, and they can help put that out on behalf of the sewer operating committee.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Okay, so this ordinance has been moved by Ms. Krummeller and seconded by Ms. Howard. Is there any further discussion? Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Ms. Howard? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
So the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on December 18th, 2017. And next is 2017-62, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regarding civil disturbances and emergency regulations and amending the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Is there a motion to introduce?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Any discussion on this ordinance, Mr. Quinn?
Question, I received an email today that indicated, it was my understanding when this was first on our radar that we didn't introduce it so that the fire departments would have a chance to discuss it.
I think you're the next
Oh,
ordinance,
I'm
not
sorry.
this one. This is
Oh,
civil
wait.
disturbances.
Oh, we're on civil disturbance? Sorry.
And this is one that's just superseded by the state also.
I apologize for creating a civil disturbance on the dais.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard? Yes. Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And now so this ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing will be on December 18th, 2017. Next is 2017-63, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning the Princeton Fire Department and amending Chapter 8 of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968, and Chapter 14 of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And I guess, can I ask you, Mr. DeShield, to just describe the process for the review of this ordinance? Because I know we all got an email from someone who was concerned, and if you could just
Sure.
explain what the process was that went through.
Sure. As council's aware, this ordinance came before council was introduced. After it was introduced, we had a conversation with the leadership of the fire department. We actually had a meeting myself, the director of emergency management, sat down with the chiefs, deputy chiefs, and the Princeton leadership to review the ordinance. There was some confusion because the ordinance really consolidates a number of provisions and moves them around. People were confused with the way some of these ordinances were moved around. They also had some concerns in terms of language, a lot of language issues. The revision that you have before you of the ordinance is based on the meeting we had with the fire department in which we reviewed this ordinance and took into account some of those revisions. So that's what you have before you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions at this point or discussion? Is there
Yeah.
a motion to introduce?
Oh, I'd like to make one change about, to take out, I thought we did this, but maybe it was on the other ordinance that was about moral character as one of the requirements on page 4.
We did start to have that discussion, and I thought we did agree that the moral character piece would come out of it because,
Who can judge that?
well, I can. Well, Mayor, I spoke to Jenny this afternoon, and as members of the Ordinance Review Committee, I think we both felt that there are a lot of there's a lot of language and the way this is written that's kind of inconsistent with the rest of our ordinances. And it would be our recommendation that if there are issues of substance, we should talk about them now. But I think we should send this to either to the committee / Lisa Maddox to have her clean this up a little bit, because they're just, it's riddled with errors, to be quite blunt.
If you're talking about some of the inconsistencies, I cleaned up a lot of that already. It's not reflected on the red line version. It is reflected in the clean version. But I went through it very thoroughly. That doesn't mean I caught everything that you may be referring to, but just so that you're aware. In the
Well, we
clean
can go
version, I
through
tried to clean
some
up
of them
most
that I caught on short notice. So if you look at page, I was looking at page 16, I guess, I think it's of the clean version, for example. Let me see if I can find it. That's just one I have. It's so hard to get to these things.
It 16, the numbering
Of the clean
under
ordinance.
C. Oh, wait, that's right.
It's correct on mine.
It's been on the other.
Yeah, there were definitely some things that were off on the numbering, but I didn't make all of those changes in the
Okay.
red line, because the red line, I wanted to show you what came out of the meeting with the fire department, so I left it alone. On the clean version, I went through, I cleaned up, there were a lot of formatting mistakes, numbering was off, and so I made all of that cleanup. Now, again, I can't
Okay.
guarantee I caught everything, but I went through it multiple times.
Okay,
But
because
I
I didn't.
only did it to the clean
I
one,
see.
not the red line, because the red line was intended to show you the changes that came out of the meeting that Mr. DeShield just referred to with the fire department leadership.
Okay.
So I didn't want to then make.
Okay.
Mess
So I did,
around
yeah,
with it
I
further.
only looked at the red line. I didn't look at the
Understood.
clean.
Yeah, no, but and also if I had tried to do all that formatting in the red line, you would have been left with a document that would have been impossible to read just because of how track changes shows everything. So
So you fixed up the capitalization, because I know you
did,
share my.
'cause I share that irritation with you. So I did go through carefully. Again, I can't guarantee I caught every single one, but I did my best.
Section 832, emergency vehicle operation, page 16. Maybe this is cleaned up, but it's unclear to me what this is. There are a list of things, A, B, C, D, and it's not sort of preceded by a phrase with a colon that would tell you what these things are. So it's
Yeah, that definitely is
Yeah, I'd
nonsensical.
have to go back and look. That may be the existing language too, because a lot of this is not new.
Okay, but
it's
it's-
taking existing provisions.
right, but it's not clear what this is.
I mean, I don't know if that would be a substantial change, but can you look at 832 right now? Can you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as simple as at the end of that first sentence, just saying, in addition, no person shall, colon, and then you've got the rest of the list. So I think that's.
But usually, it's a colon. The first part would be ending with a colon. Like, here's the list of. See, it doesn't say what.
No, understood. I think we can just add a couple of words to make it clear. But I don't
Okay,
think that's going to
it
be.
sort of looks to me like the sentence at the bottom may need to come up. It's not clear what that list of things is describing to me.
Understood. I think we can fix that.
You know, on page 6, these are just things I kind of caught it at a horse's gallop. Page 6, under C, things are listed as 1, 2, 2, 3, not 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, again, I'll look in the clean version because I think that.
That is the clean version.
Okay.
I'm looking at the clean version. On a more substantive level, I do have a question. On section 837, and that is the authority at fires and other emergencies. I always thought it was the fire chief who was the person in charge. and this has listed as the Director of Emergency and Safety Services. I always thought it was the fire chief. No? Am I mistaken on that?
Actually, what this is saying, you are correct. The fire chief is in charge of the fire scene. I believe what this section does, it authorizes, and correct me if I'm not right, either the fire chief, the director of emergency services, a line officer, or someone else who arrives at a scene is the first to arrive at a scene, becomes the incident commander. Is that correct? So that's what all this says, and this is exactly what happens at currently. This is not saying, if you look earlier, I'm not sure where it is in the section, it talks about who's responsible for what in terms of
At
the
fires.
operation. Yeah. This is
Well,
just saying
there
at a
was
fire-
operation, and then there was the part that had the line of authority at a fire and the line of authority for operating. But
Correct. This is just saying, making it clear that if there's a fire scene, really it's the first person of authority who's on the scene becomes the incident commander on the scene. And that's what happens.
But if the
currently.
fire chief shows up, is the fire chief not the person in command when the fire chief shows up?
The way I believe, and Bob can come up and kind of explain.
I mean,
the way this,
we've got Bob at Emergency Services, but we may not always have somebody at Emergency Services who also has fire experience.
But I believe the way it works, it's really pretty much the first person with command authority on the scene becomes the commander and coordinates. He may relinquish command if the chief comes on, but that's what this provides for.
Correct. So how the incident command structure works is you can have an engine show up with a 4-person crew, and the driver could actually take command. So the state sets minimum standards for a person that can be in command of a fire scene. And what this does is just give the authority down the line that whoever shows up can take command. And then usually what happens is when a chief shows up or a higher ranking officer, then you have a face-to-face on the situation you have, and you can transfer command over to that chief.
But who's in charge if the chief and the emergency services person are both there?
Who's in charge?
Yeah.
It just depends on the situation. I mean, I've had times where I've transferred command to the chiefs, and I've had other times where a chief told me, I'll take the operation, you stay in command. It's just driven by the situation. I think where the confusion comes in is that the fire chief's in charge of firematics. When the bell goes off, they're in charge. They're in charge of readiness, making sure that personnel are trained. They're in charge of the apparatus, making sure the apparatus is ready. Nobody's trying to replace the chiefs. This basically gives a line of authority that the fire department also has to be accountable to somebody, and that's through me, through the administrator, to the council. So the fire chief's in charge of the fire operations.
But this isn't the operating side of it. This is under authority at fires and other emergencies. And so it doesn't seem to me that you want to have a situation.
But what you want,
This seems like it
no, but
could
what
be
you want on a
troublesome.
fire scene, you want that person, the first person that's there, you have to at all times have someone in command of a scene.
Right.
So what this authorizes is just lists all the people who could be potentially commanders on the scene. And that's all that lists, all the people who could potentially be commanders on the scene if they're the first person there. It doesn't take any authority away from the fire chief as being the head of firematics. All it says is if there's a fire scene, and this is kind of goes for any emergency operations, someone has to be in charge from the beginning of the process to the end.
I understand that, but I guess I just don't read this as being that clear about who's in charge of those.
Are there any other questions on this ordinance?
Oh, I had one more.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay. Ms. Crumler?
Yeah, on page 4, it says, underneath the one that we're going to strike that says, for the qualifications of the fire department, it says, that the person should be of moral character. It says that they should have a principal residence within a 15-mile radius of Nassau Hall. I just thought that was a little bit weird, that we have Nassau Hall rather than the municipal building or something. The fire department. Or, right. Maybe we should say if we could just change that to.
Yeah, I mean, that dates back, nobody changed that. That
I
dates
know,
back from
I'm
the
sure it
beginning.
does. It just seems like we're looking at it. It looks weird to me. It's on page 4, Article 2.
And are there any other questions or concerns for this ordinance?
I do have some. So in the beginning, they have a definition of the chief of police, but do we mean to have the chief of police in there as opposed to the chief of the fire department? As a definition?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Right, it was just been in there from previous, so it was just left in.
But there's no definition for the chief of the fire department. I mean,
multiple subsequent sections of the ordinance that identify the chiefs, the assistant chiefs. I mean, there's like substantive
There are
provisions within, so I don't think you then have to have a separate definition for it.
there's also something in here in section, 831 about taking the vehicles out of Princeton city limits, I guess. I assume that non-departmental individuals are not allowed to ride in those vehicles?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, at times you may have other members of other fire departments, if they're at a mutual aid scene, in them for transportation purposes.
But they'd be professionals.
Right, they'd
I
be
mean,
other firefighters.
So I don't know whether it's important to say that people aren't driving their families around in them. Well, there may be insurance considerations,
Right.
that they have to be used for professional purposes.
I mean, that's basically addressed in the municipal policy for municipal vehicles. It is a municipal vehicle.
Mr. Quinn, did you have a comment?
Oh, I just caught a typo. On page 15, last paragraph. What's that? Yeah, chief's absence. There's also an extra space before that comma, so.
Okay. So from my notes, it seems like there's 3 substantive changes, and there might be more, but these are the ones I found, was that we wanted to take out the reference to moral character, to replace the reference to Nassau Hall with the Witherspoon Street Fire Company. I'm not sure, what's the address of that on Witherspoon? What's the Witherspoon?
I think it's 363.
363.
Well, frankly, do we even have to have that? Because does it say 15 miles? That's pretty far.
Well, considering we have members from Plainsboro, Lawrence, Montgomery, that are members of our fire company as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, In the section on...
Sorry, I
sorry.
wanted to finish the list, and
Oh,
then
sorry,
we can
sorry,
add
sorry,
more
sorry.
if we
Add
need to. So
more.
that was number 2, and then the third one was to remove the definition of chief of police.
No,
No?
not necessarily remove it. I just wondered whether it was a mistake and they were meaning to define the fire chief. It was more a question. The
Okay.
chief of police is referred to in the ordinance.
Right.
It's the fire ordinance, so I just thought maybe they meant to say,
If I would have to take a stab at it, it could have something to do with the fire prevention ordinance, which we split them now. So we're doing fire department and then fire prevention. And in the fire prevention one, it talks about fire lanes and working with the police to make sure we, keep the fire lanes clear and who has authority to give out tickets and things like that. That may be where it comes from.
Mayor, can I just jump in? You used the word substantial change, and I want to be careful because that is the language that means, would mean that we couldn't introduce today, right?
No, I think we could introduce, right? Because it's not,
Oh, yeah, you can introduce. This is brand new.
Oh, because we're
It's
just
in
at
between
introduction.
introduction
Okay.
and
Yeah.
adoption, and it's, once an ordinance is introduced.
Got it, okay.
You
'Cause
then
this is
can't
our-
make substantial changes without
Because
reintroducing.
tonight is the last night we can introduce if we're then going to adopt before the end of the year. Okay,
That's right.
sorry I got confused, but thank you.
well, are the junior members accounted for anywhere? You have each company where the numbers are wrong, page 6. Each company may, at its own discretion, have various types of memberships, honorary, life, auxiliary, social, but there are junior members as well, are there not?
Correct.
Do you want to throw those in there?
We can. They're covered under the SOGs. I believe they're in the membership too.
Right. One of the things we try to do here too is not to cover those things that are already in the standard operating procedures for the department. So this is the broad outline, and what we try to stay away from is trying to put everything, every piece in this ordinance, but kind of broadly define them.
so my recommendation, I know there might be some small non-substantive cleanup still that can be done between now and the 18th. But I just want to make sure we flag everything. What? Well, the public hearing is scheduled for the 18th. So I think we have maybe 2 meetings back to back because of Christmas. We're not meeting on Christmas. So I think we're down then to those 2 changes that I have down on my list, unless there's more. There's the moral character, and there's the changing the Manassas Hall to 363 Witherspoon. Was there anything else at this point? And then I feel like there's just, if there's, let's now use the clean copy as the version we're looking at, and if there's other changes or things that need to be clarified, should we send them to you, Trishka, or to Lisa?
You could just send them to me.
Okay, send them through Trishka, and then you can walk through if there's any changes that were made between now and the 18th, but my guess is most of it's going to be just clarifying language. Okay. In that case, is there a motion to introduce with those 2 changes?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Liverman.
Second.
And seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
So the ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing for this ordinance will be on December 18th, 2017. And next we come to resolutions. The first is 17-368, the resolution adopting the 2018 leaf, branch, and log collection schedule. And I don't know if we have any questions for Mr. Huff, or why don't we start by just getting it on the table? So can I please have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Quinn. Is there any discussion on this? My understanding is there's no real major changes from the 2017 schedule,
Except for July.
except for July.
And maybe Bob can explain why we're taking that out.
Good evening. The major change is removing a July leaf bag collection. This past July, we had approximately 125 bags that we collected during that collection, and close to 70% of them were contaminated, which meant we didn't pick them up. They contained grass, branches, soil, garbage, and bricks. So as a result, when the guys get out and they pick them up and they can't lift them up, or they appear to be heavier than a regular leaf bag, they obviously start to look in them and then leave a violation notice on them. And then we get a phone call, why didn't we pick the bag up? And somebody either explains to them or goes back out there and tells them, this is what was in it and why we couldn't take it. So unfortunately, the July and the August collections they were a good idea at the time, but unfortunately, the number of residents that they're serving, and the problems we're having, it's our opinion, it's not worth doing.
And I also want to mention that the Lawrence Center for, I don't know what it's called.
Eco Center.
Yeah, Eco Center is open, and so residents can take their bags there if they have them, and there's whatever other stuff there.
Okay. So, and just for timing, assuming this gets approved tonight, then the schedules get printed up and distributed?
Schedules will get printed up, edited if there was anything tonight. They'll get printed up, and we will try and get them out like we did last year by the end of this month, early January, and we certainly will be doing our normal blast with regard to the holiday tree pickup and brush collection throughout the month of January.
Okay. Yeah, the one thing that I don't think we had the bags available at ACE in time for this year's schedule, but it would be nice, I think, to put a note on the schedule that the free leaf bags are available there. All right. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Butler?
Yep. Bob, there is a week with the brush collection on it. There were 2, and now you're down to 1. This schedule has a brush pickup.
No, we're still doing the brush. What we're not picking up is the leaf bags. In July, and we're not picking up leaf bags in August. We took out the August one last year. We're recommending taking out the July one this year. There's the last one there's sectional ones through April and May and into June, and then there's one last sweep of bags the last week of June, and then there was another one in July, another one in August. Well, it used to be August. We've taken those out. The brush is still there, and we will be doing the municipal-wide sweeps of brush, but we leave that to be announced so that we can adjust that based on the need and the volume, storms, et cetera.
Does the schedule have the information about where the Lawrence Center is?
Yes, it
on
does.
it? Oh,
Yeah,
good,
it
okay.
does. Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, resolution passes unanimously. Thank you.
As long as I'm sitting here, can I just mention that the week of December 18th, we will be doing a municipal-wide leaf collection. I know there's some sections, the trees have not cooperated again. All the leaves haven't come down. We're aware of it. We will be going back throughout the entire community the week of the 18th with all staff doing one final sweep before the holidays and the end of the year. So we are getting some calls on that. It will be going out. There'll be a reverse call that'll go out, and it'll be on the website, social media, et cetera. So, but we are doing it that week.
Okay, terrific.
Mayor, while Bob is here, could I bring up another issue that I think involves Public Works? With Friday being a holiday, it's also a huge day in town, and town didn't look so great. There's just bags of garbage all over, and I know there are residents living above buildings that they're not even getting close to the trash cans anymore. They just seem to be pitching them out the window. So would it be possible to have some small crew work downtown? I mean, we had the turkey trot barriers all over. We had garbage all over. And we had my pet peeve, which is that the A and B, I guess, has the construction. They have some bagged meters. But they weren't necessarily working that day, and those bag meters on that big day in town, I mean, even if we get the full amount on the meters, not all meter income is created equal. And to have those construction vehicles take up spots for our merchants on, you know, one of the biggest days of the year when retail's struggling is really frustrating to see.
With regard to the bag meters, I will speak to Nick. And between us and the police, we will look at that and
If we
certainly look at it as we get to the holidays, as we get to the end of the year. As far as the trash, the crews were in. There were people in that collected trash from all the municipal cans. They weren't in on Thursday, but they were here Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And there is a lot of trash that's put out by by stores and residents. And unfortunately, some of them, if they didn't have trash on Thursday because of the holiday, it got left out there. So I guess it's something to think about if we want to collect it in the future, the municipality, of trash that's put out by businesses who normally would have a Thursday collection and didn't have it. That's what it is. I mean, I know I know exactly what you're talking about.
I mean, just bags of it. You would
Yeah.
think that even
Yeah.
some of the merchants would go out and pick it up. You know, like, it's, you know, the bags get ripped open, it's spread all over Witherspoon Street, right next to Bank of
Merchants
America.
put trash out on Wednesday for a collection that didn't occur on Thursday, and it sat there until their next collection, which was this morning in some cases.
Well, I almost think we should pick it up, given the fact that it's such a big day in town, and the tree lighting, and, you know, it's otherwise pretty festive.
Maybe we need
Look into it.
another look at that. I mean, we always try, right? I mean, we've tried before, but doing some kind of information for the people who live downtown, because I think some of them aren't even aware. I know we talked to people who weren't aware that it was illegal to put their garbage out.
Well, this is something maybe we can refer back to the Public Works Committee to take a look at and see if there's an information campaign that can be done as part of that.
I actually think it goes in part to the Health Committee, right? They've got to.
Health does the enforcement on the trash.
Yes.
You are correct, and in some cases, I'm sure there are people who left Tuesday or Wednesday for the long weekend and put their trash out and threw it out someplace, and there it sat through the week.
Okay. Thank you. I think we've already voted on this resolution, so let's move on to 17370, resolution authorizing the purchase of Key Big Ten Double Jacket Attack Hose. Wow. Key True ID Double Jacketed Premium Attack Hose and the Key Magnum Double Jacket Supply Attack Hose through Water Supply Innovations LLC for the Princeton Fire Department in an amount not to exceed $39,064. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. Are there any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next we come
Excuse me,
to.
Mayor. We actually did not adopt 369.
Oh,
17 through
sorry.
69.
Yep.
We hadn't even,
Yep. I got confused there. All right. Can we go back then to, do we need to amend the agenda? Does that mess you up too much? Okay. 17369, resolution authorizing an increase in the amount of $40,000 to the current value of the existing contract with Tom L. Wells Electrical Contractor Incorporated for electrical services, various locations within the municipality of Princeton during 2017. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Ms. Krummeller.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh,
Yep, Mr. Miller.
We're adding $40,000 to an existing contract. What does that bring the value of the contract up to?
The original contract is 150. It brings it up to 190. I don't believe we will get to that number this year, but in discussing it with the CFO, originally I was going to bring it up to 180, and she asked me to take it to 190 just to be on the safe side for the rest of the year. We have several things that are in the works and several pieces of equipment that need to be purchased as part of making some building repairs.
So this is for both services and purchase of equipment?
There are some things that we have Wells purchase for us because he can get them for, through his contacts, he's able to get them cheaper for us than we can get them.
Thank you.
Okay, let's just vote again for clarity. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. Next, we go down again to 17371, resolution authorizing the purchase of structural firefighting gear for the Princeton Volunteer Fire Department.
I'll move it.
I think, do I need to read the whole thing or no?
No, there were two fire departments, so we did.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Ms. Krummeller and seconded by Ms. Howard. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 17372, resolution authorizing an invasive species project management agreement with the Friends of Princeton Open Space for the Mountain Lakes Restoration Project. Was there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved by Mr. Liverman, seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Any questions or comments?
I have a question. Is this, do we have to put up any money for this, or is this all grant money? Is this a matching grant?
No, this is actually the grant that FOPOS has. This is the agreement between us and FOPOS in terms of actually performing the project.
Well, go ahead. You're going to say something?
I was just going to say that the project management agreement is a requirement of the grant that FOPOS received from the DEP.
Okay, but this doesn't require any commitment of funds on our part.
I don't know the terms of the grant, so I'd have to let Wendy Mager speak to that. I don't believe
Wendy,
so.
can you speak to that? It wasn't clear to me. And also, can you talk a little bit about what this is for? Is this all invasive species? Because it looked like it was for reforestation.
It looks like it's
Right.
50%.
So this agreement does not require any commitment of funds by the municipality, the one that you're being asked to approve tonight. The council previously approved a contribution to the project in the form of some time of summer interns this next summer and summer of 2019 to a time value of $6,000. That would be the municipality's only financial contribution, if you will, to the project. Does that respond to your question?
Yes, it does. Somehow in one of these agreements, I thought we also had to put up a matching amount to the 50.
No,
It
the
does-
matching funds are being
it does say
provided
that, doesn't
from grants and Friends of Open Space.
Yeah,
If
but
you-
the 50% is not us. It's between FOPOS and another entity,
Well,
I think.
do you have it?
Yeah.
It just says.
It says Princeton shall make an in-kind contribution toward the matching grant of $6,000, consisting of time value of summer interns.
No, but there's a spot that talks about a 50%.
In one of the whereas clauses there, yeah, further up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear where it is you're looking.
I didn't mark it.
It's at the bottom,
Oh, here it is.
or the top of the second page.
Yeah. It's the whereas on July 6,
On the bottom of the
2017, a
first
letter was
page.
received from the New Jersey DEP protection, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yes. mhm.
In the 50, with a matching requirement of 50% of the project costs.
Yes, that is a requirement of the grant. It's just that the money is not coming from the municipality. It's coming from
It's coming from FOPOS.
us and from grants that have been made to us. Yeah.
Okay, that does answer my question. And then, is this for the invasive species or reforestation or?
Yes, I'm sorry. So it's really a combination of the two. So the project entails going in, removing a lot of invasive species from the project area, which is 18 acres of the preserve. And then there will be, I think the total is 5,000 plants, a combination of trees and herbaceous plants, native plants, planted in that project area.
Good. And one other question. In here, somewhere in here, and again, I didn't mark it, I apologize, there was, the report that we had done a few years ago was the East Ridge, was it not? The big...
There was a substantial report done about the Eastern Ridge. Yes, that's true.
Right. But in here, you're talking about a western section.
Yes.
Not that
So-
report. You're not.
No, this
Not
is
that
not specifically
substantial.
related to that report.
Okay.
Now, subsequent to the report you mentioned, Mike Van Clough did some additional work which included surveying invasive species in the Mountain Lakes Preserve.
Okay. I thought one of the whereases referred to that earlier report, which I thought was the Eastern Ridge, not the Mountain Lakes Preserve.
There may be a reference in the whereases to some sort of study or report, but it would be to Mike Van Clough's more recent study, if there is
Okay.
such a reference, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Wendy? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Next is 17373, resolution authorizing professional services agreement with Chambers Architecture Incorporated for professional architectural and engineering services for the design and construction administration of various improvements to the Harrison Street Vehicle Maintenance Garage, the Public Works Facility, in an amount not to exceed $32,800. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Kremiller. Any questions or comments on this resolution? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 17374, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to 72 Hour LLC DBA National Auto Fleet Group via the National Joint Powers Alliance contract for fleet services, parts and equipment, vehicles, cars, vans, SUVs, and light trucks. Contract number 120716 NAF for various new unused vehicles for use by the municipality of Princeton in the amount of $207,405.57. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Quinn and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any questions or discussions on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 17375, resolution approving a license agreement with Princeton University for radio equipment installation at Fine Hall in the amount of $1. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Kremiller. Any questions or comments on this resolution? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And next is 17376, resolution in support of North America Climate Summit Charter. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Ms. Howard. Is there seconded by Mr. Liverman? And this was, I submitted this with some background material. I don't know if there are any questions on this or.
I do have a question.
Yes.
What exactly does signing this mean? What is this
So,
hold us to?
yeah, so if you read the resolution, there's some specific language about what Princeton would be committing to. Essentially, what this is given that the United States is, I think, now the only country in the world who hasn't signed on to the Paris Agreement, that there's a movement for individual municipalities across the United States, and this is North America, so being joined by leaders in Canada and Mexico to essentially start to implement some of the Paris Agreement on the local level, so that if someday we have a new administration that does sign on, we've continued to make progress, and it's a way to, I think when there's failure to act, at the national level. It's the only thing we can do is sort of take up the slack on the municipal level. But some of this is work that we're already doing. So, for example, making progress on implementing the bike plan, continuing to expand our EV charging stations. We're going to be working with Sustainable Princeton in the coming year on a climate action plan. So as part of that, there'll be efforts to calculate our emissions, which we don't have a great number for right now. So even just setting that baseline and making efforts to reduce emissions. I think some of the low-hanging fruit are areas where you can both lower emissions and save money. So, just with this LED streetlight session that Tim and I went to, the towns that do it save tons of money after, and, depending how it can be structured, within 2 or 3 years, you're saving, it's amazing how much energy those streetlights cost. And so that's just one small example of where it's can be a big money saver.
Well, I just want to say, at Reorg Day this year, I brought up my concern about the possibility that the U.S. would withdraw from the Paris Accords and express my disappointment about that. The handwriting was sort of on the wall that Trump had that in mind to withdraw from the Paris Accords. And I think when we passed the resolution was for the country to stay in the Paris Accords. But what I expressed concern about on Reorg Day, and I still have today, is that we are going to be asked to take this up, and as a small town, we have to weigh some of these things, the cost of some of these things, versus all of the other good things that we're trying to do. And I think we've done a number of remarkable things, including our solar field. Thank you very much, Bernie. And we have our climate action plan that we're working on. We have our composting program that is a little bit lackluster, but we're trying, and it would be probably more robust if we knew that our composting was ending up in a convenient spot that actually made money or saved money. It's not that clear now how effective that is. But I guess I worry when I look at these things that we're committing to, I think we're making progress on our own. I think we'll continue to make progress. I view it as not unlike being a sanctuary city, why we might support sanctuary cities, and we're awfully happy that there are sanctuary cities to fight this fight. But the question is whether it's right for Princeton, and it becomes a little bit circular. If we agree to this, then it comes back to us in the form of doing something, and it said, well, we signed on for this, but we would be signing on for this stuff without really looking at the cost analysis. And I think Councilman Miller has brought up, and I certainly support, that when we look at this stuff, we have not considered very carefully some of the financial considerations. And so specifically, we're talking about providing every resident with safe, accessible choices to walk, bike, or use public transit. But I don't know. We can't even stand up to the people on Olden Lane who are complaining about not having safe sidewalks and making sidewalks. We have people who chose to live in rural areas here who may not want sidewalks or may not want even, they're on country roads. We may not be able to put bike lanes on the country roads without great expense. So we're looking at these things, and they all look very attractive, and we would support them in theory, but they're not against we haven't done any work on them to measure them against all the competing demands we have on our limited resources. So I guess I just have concerns about it. It's not that I certainly wouldn't want us in the Paris Accords. I do. I said that at the beginning of the year. But I worry about making these commitments as a small town. It seems to prioritize this above many other things that are of concern to our citizens.
I have a rather similar concern about this as well. And again, it's not that I don't support the Paris Accords, and it's not that I'm not deeply disappointed in the behavior of our federal government in withdrawing from the Paris Accords. But once again, it is a case of the federal government abdicating its responsibility and looking to the states and municipalities to pick up the ball and run with it. And while we can do many good things in Princeton, have done many good things, I think we need to be cautious about what we are committing to. We put our name on a document, and it becomes a moral commitment on our part to fulfill what is in that document. And we're then open to the fact that there are advocates who will say, you agreed to do this. Why aren't you doing it? Where are you backing up your commitment to do it? My concern is that if we are going to try and step in and do things that should have been done at the federal level and passed down to the states in terms of federal support coming from the federal government to the states and through the states to the municipalities to implement sections of the Paris Accord, if we're going to undertake things on our own, we need to know what it is we are going to undertake, when we're going to do it, and how we're going to pay for it. And whether or not we pay for it through user fees, whether we pay for it through general revenue, but how do we agree amongst ourselves to pay for this? Otherwise, we're opening the door to something that we may or may not be able to complete and fulfill.
Ms. Howard?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that I would feel like it would violate my conscience if we didn't open the door, because we talk the talk about frustration with things at the federal level, and we have to walk the walk at the local level when the federal government fails us. I'm hopeful that we'll have a new partner in Trenton who will make it easier for us to do the right thing, but I think we have to, and I think, Mayor, I want to commend you, because actually I think when you look specifically at what we're committing to, they are all very specific things that we are doing. Is anyone here saying we're not going to do complete streets? I hope not, because we've adopted it. Is anyone here saying we're not going to promote the curbside collection program? I hope not, because we are doing it. I don't see a single thing here that I wouldn't stand up for. And I do agree, this is not, actually, we often pass very lofty resolutions. This is one of the more specific resolutions we've endorsed. And that's the beauty of it to me, and the beauty of the Paris Agreement was that each signer was setting their own goals and going to meet them. And that's what was so outrageous about pulling out, was that it was not imposed by anyone else. So we're imposing on ourselves, and I think the way it's drafted is very consistent with the things we are doing. It's interesting, Mayor, you mentioned earlier that we were the third best in the state on Sustainable Princeton? So if we don't show leadership, I don't know who else will, and I think this is something that a generation from now, I think we will be sorry if we didn't.
Yeah, Ms. Carmelo?
Well, I also feel comfortable with it because I feel like, for one thing, if you read it carefully, there is a lot of language, kind of letting you off the hook, really. I mean, it's really a symbolic, I think it's really good, and I think symbolic things like this are really important for all the reasons everyone's been talking about. But it says each municipality can set their own goals, and it doesn't, and even our goals are, if you look at the language, there's nothing that's actually, specific, like with times or dates. And so I feel comfortable with it. I mean, it says we're committed to providing, to continue implementing complete streets, which we're going to do. It's evaluating the curbside, increasing adoption of, which everyone wants to do.
Hold on. I just don't think everybody does necessarily, I mean, in theory we do, but I don't think
But we have a bike plan that.
but we don't have people aren't signing up for the composting. If it was important to our residents, why aren't they signing up? Why aren't they paying for it? And so essentially, you're going to be imposing a tax on them.
Well, I don't think it's saying that I understand Joe's and Bernie's point in regard to signing a contract or something of that sort, where we have to pay extra dollars, or we have to expand our current sidewalk situation and so forth, where it's a demand. But this isn't saying that at all. This is saying this is the direction you would like to go. This is the direction that we should go. And if when we look at projects, we keep this in mind. I don't think it's a heavy fist. I don't think it's a heavy hammer. And I think it's what probably the majority of the town would definitely like. I mean, I don't think that it's saying that we have to spend, a whole bunch of additional dollars. I don't think it's saying that we have to do anything. It's saying that what we have to do is keep in mind when we look at issues and look at projects that this is the direction that we're trying to go. And a lot of this we are doing now.
I mean, I think of it like the master plan that we just passed, the circulation element, it says we want to get people out of their cars. We want people to take public transportation. We have these goals, but
this is a commitment.
Mr. Quinn, and then I wanted to open up to public comment.
I shared, I can see where there's concern that this looks like it's a laundry list of unfunded mandates that we're passing, but Jenny brought up the master plan, and I see this more akin to the master plan. If you go through our master plan, it has us building roads that could never be built. It has us conserving open space that we couldn't possibly afford to conserve, that we as a municipality couldn't possibly afford to conserve all of the open space that's in the conservation element. It's aspirational and a framework that that captures a lot of what we're already doing, and urges us to do more when we can possibly do so. I understand the concern again about it doesn't strike me as a list of unfunded mandates.
I'd like to open it up to anybody in the public who'd like to speak on this.
Hi there, Molly Jones, 273 Hamilton. I'm here, though, as the Executive Director of Sustainable Princeton. So from our perspective, being now looking deeply into the Climate Action Plan, we very much feel that everything that's included within this charter speaks to what will be included within the Climate Action Plan. We find that the really broad-reaching umbrellas, just has been expressed by many of the council members. They give you a lot of room to figure out the cost-effective, realistic ways that our community can fulfill the goals that are articulated here. I also wanted to just add that, make sure everyone's aware that the new governor has stated that within his first 100 days of office, he will be developing and implementing a new state energy master plan, which will put New Jersey on the path to 100% clean energy by 2050. We definitely also, through our conversations, are hearing that there's a lot of hope that many of the pockets of funding for things such as electric vehicle charging stations, energy audits, all of these types of things, possibly renewable projects, we should hopefully be seeing more of that from the state. So that should help reduce some of the burden from Princeton. So all that being said, definitely want you to know that on behalf of Sustainable Princeton, we encourage and support your signing of this charter.
Thanks, Molly.
David Cohen, 135 Terhune Road. I support all the statements in favor of signing on to this accord. I just wanted to make a couple of comments about the financial aspect of it, because I think that, number one, many of the measures that we can take immediately do actually pay for themselves within a very favorable ROI, return on investment scenario. Things like clean energy, solar panel installations, alternative fuel vehicles, and stuff like that we'd be considering for the municipality. But then even beyond that, I think that there are a lot of things right now where our pricing structure isn't really quite right. And it sort of relates to the parking study and the conclusions that they reached where, we're charging people the wrong amounts for parking on the street versus parking in the garage. Well, right now we're charging people the wrong amounts for the way they dispose of landfill garbage versus the way they dispose of composted garbage. So I think, specifically to your point, Joe, having this resolution may help us to make those hard decisions to actually change the pricing structure in town to be more in line with the actual costs to the community for dealing with some of this stuff. And so, and if you look at externalities, the same could be said for the Complete Streets, program. If you really look at the costs of congestion that can be relieved, the costs of repaving more frequently because of heavier traffic on the streets versus bicycles and pedestrians. If you really look at the whole cost picture, a lot of this stuff pays for itself, and our failure to see that is just a result of not really looking at the whole picture. So I'm confident that not only is this the right thing to do ethically, but it is financially as well.
Thanks.
And I'm Scott Sillers, and I think it's very important for the entire country to voice its position that this country stands behind the Paris Accords, regardless of what the president of this country says. The louder and clearer voice that we can use, the better we are. And it would be surprising if Princeton wasn't one of the first to want to sign on to something like that. This is a resolution of intent. It's not a resolution that commits us to any fine action. Indeed, if a resolution like this could bind future councils or future governments or future taxpayers, then you have a whole lot of past resolutions around that you ought to be far more worried about than this one, because you guys crank out resolutions on policies every week that are riven with intent, but just that. They're an intent on what you want to do in the future, and I think that is the spirit in which this one ought to be taken, that we are voicing the spirit of Princeton to support the Paris Accords to the fullest extent possible. Thank you.
Thanks. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this? I guess, no, okay. All right, so I'd like to bring it back to council. The resolution's been moved and seconded. Are there any last comments?
Yeah, I just want to make clear, I don't disagree with anything that was said in public comment. And David, to your point, that if this makes sense financially, then we'll know that, and we should have known it, and maybe we already should be doing some of this stuff if it makes so much sense. From a financial standpoint, my frustration, it's a little bit this, but it's on any number of things that we approve of without ever considering the financial arrangement. And then it comes back and is used as a sort of weapon against us that you agreed to this. These are commitments that you're making. And I mean, I guess I would disagree with Scott that I take these, you are making commitments and we haven't really analyzed them. Meanwhile, we are committed to the Climate Action Plan. It's not as if we're not doing stuff. We've done quite a bit. We know what we need to do. If we really want to take some position, in support of the Paris Accords, we can all do that. We need to elect people who will get us back in the Paris Accords. That seems to me more important than a kind of superficial gesture that on many things that we're already doing, but that we haven't really analyzed. So,
I have a concern about entering into something where you make a moral commitment, and then when you try to fulfill it, you have difficulty fulfilling it. And I support the Paris Accords. There's no question about that. And I sure as hell, sitting up here, somebody would look at me and say, this guy's anti-environment. He's against doing the right thing for the environment. But I come back to some specific examples. We've wrestled with the organics collection program for about 4 or 5 years now. We've never really been able to get past about 1,000 households participating in the organics collection program. We subsidize the program out of the general revenue fund. There are other municipalities that have bit the bullet on organic collection and have mandated organic collection. Are we prepared to do that? Are we prepared to mandate organic collection for all households in the municipality and pay for it? It's probably the right thing to do. Do we have the political will to do it and the political will to pay for it? Solar energy is another example. The way the state has constructed the financing for solar energy programs makes it very difficult for municipalities to reap the benefit, the economic benefit of solar energy, unless it enters into the kind of agreement we entered into for the River Road project, which is a power purchase agreement, and then many of the benefits go to the private sector that is financing it. Another example might be or another way of doing it might be for the municipality to finance it ourselves. But we can't get the tax credits that would go to the private sector if we revert to private sector financing, which is essentially what we're kind of channeled to do under the law. Those are two examples. Would I like to see more solar? Sure, I'd like to see more solar. I was bitterly disappointed by the fact that we could not get bidders for the solar project to go on top of the Spring Street garage and provide electrical energy to the library at a rate cheaper than the library could buy it from the utilities. Why couldn't we get it? The private sector wasn't interested in bidding on the project. It wasn't big enough. Why doesn't the municipality do it ourselves? We don't do it ourselves because we would not reap the tax benefits under the law as it's presently constructed. We would have to subsidize it. And sure, it would be a good thing to do to have solar on top of the Spring Street garage. Do we have the political will to subsidize the project? Not clear to me that we do. So my concern is that the goals are good. The goals of the Paris Accord are good. The goals of the Chicago Accord are good. But when the rubber hits the road, without financial help from the federal government, without financial help from the states, the municipalities are going to have to pick up the tab. And that is going to be a very difficult thing for towns to do in a state like New Jersey, where the municipalities are funded primarily by property tax, because that says that every person that pays property taxes in this town will have to pick up part of the tab for what we commit to do. That's my concern. It's not that I'm anti-environment. I am pro-environment. However, I am concerned that we're morally committing ourselves, not under a contract that will hold up in a court, but morally committing ourselves to do something which at some future date we may find it difficult for us to fulfill.
Can I call for the question? for the vote?
Sure. I just would like to just redirect Mr. Miller to looking at the language under number 2 for the resolution, what we're specifically agreeing to, because I think that might settle some of your concerns. There's nothing in there about solar. I worked with Sustainable Princeton in putting together this list of things that were already underway that seemed achievable. And a lot of the stuff is what the municipality is going to be doing over the next 2 years. And a lot of it, I'm assuming, is already going to be on our priority list for next year. And the reason why it's not just an empty gesture is that there's something more powerful in lots of communities getting together to do something together versus just Princeton working on its own climate action plan in a vacuum, doing its own complete streets plan in a vacuum, and all of these things just on our own. And I think we've seen, especially over the past year, just it can imbue more meaning and more power into what you're doing if you do it in conjunction with other communities. And certainly it's a trend I've seen of towns trying to come together to work together. I think Ms. Howard there's like a term for it about like
Cross-pollination?
or something. It was like progressive.
This progressive, it's this new progressive federalism.
Progressive
where,
federalism, yeah.
Instead of where, more locally, we're pushing a progressive agenda, yeah.
Right.
Mayor, I'll just compliment too that I think, that you really did a nice job in drafting this and picking. What it's doing, as Jenny said, is committing ourselves to trying to make progress on goals we've already set, right, Jenny? I think that's how you said it. Not saying specifically we'll have 5 new sidewalks, but saying we're going to continue to implement complete streets. And we have complete streets on the books, so we better be continuing to implement it. So I think it is written in such a way that we can be proud that we're committing to make progress, but not putting ourselves in a position that we won't be able to achieve.
Right. Okay.
I want to say one final thing, and that is that this really is a council decision. And at the last meeting, this was really kind of waved under our nose and said, it's okay if we sign on. And I think tonight's discussion, if nothing else, showed the importance of decisions that really do commit the governing body to a course of action or a position need to come to us.
Well, it wasn't, at the last meeting, I did it under reports. I received the language, I think, an hour before the meeting, and I don't think we could have had a discussion about it. I think I would have been criticized had I sent something out at 6 p.m. and asked people to vote on it at 7 p.m. And
well, I know, but you did ask us to make a, sort of say, like, nobody minds if I do this, right? So you essentially did do that without sending out the material.
Well, I wasn't able to give you language because it wasn't available at the time. So, but I agree that this is much better to have everybody sign on.
And I agree too that it's a good discussion, and I thank Bernie and Joe, because I always say a debated decision is a good decision.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, so he abstained. So there's 4 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention. Okay, and now we come to our consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature, passed by a single vote. Are there any items anybody would like removed from the consent agenda? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
Could I pull the art committee? Number 4.
Okay. So.
Adoption of 1 through 9, except for 4.
Second.
Okay, so, so it's been moved by Ms. Howard, seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then we'll take up Resolution 17380, resolution establishing a public art selection committee. Just to get it on the table, is there a motion to approve?
Second. Yeah.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Quinn and seconded by Ms. Butler.
I was just reading the composition of the committee, and you've got 1 member of the Arts Council and 2 non-voting members. I guess, are there any, who else is going to, I mean, are they council members? What are we doing?
Well, typically, I was modeling this on some of the other committees that have been put together, and typically there's not a member of council on them, but we can. I mean, it's...
Well, if we're approving public art, I would think we would want a representative of council on there, wouldn't we?
Well, it can become something where it's more political. So, for example, nobody was on the Avalon Bay.
But that's not public, is it? It's on private property.
It was sort of...
Oh, it's private, but then it became, we
own it.
Yeah, I think they gave it to us.
Or, for example, for the, I think for the Gates project on Heinz Plaza, that was also, I don't think anybody from council was on that, because I remember talking to Jeff
ultimately, they did
Nathanson.
have to come to the borough, and they needed considerable funding. They
Somebody was on the council. I thought
Barbara Trustad.
Barbara Trustad
Oh,
was on
was
that
she?
committee, yeah.
Okay, well,
I don't know if she was on an official capacity, but they definitely ended up.
I don't think this committee is going to be a big lift, and I'm certainly open to however people want to do it. I was hoping to actually have the names on here, but was not able to get in touch with everybody before the meeting, so I'm going to bring names forward at the next meeting. But if people want either a liaison or one of the members to be a member of the council, I think that's...
I think it's a good idea, because I want to be on it.
Okay.
Can I comment on it? Because just a brief comment on the resolution. You know, we've accepted 3 pieces of art for installation in the municipal building, and we've been very fortunate with what we've received and what we've accepted. And one of the concerns that led to doing this is that we may not always be so fortunate with what's offered to us. And it might be a good idea to have someone other than a person like me who knows virtually nothing about art, but knows what I like and dislike in art, in the position of saying, yeah, that's a good work of art. Let's hang it up in the building. The library did this. The library established a committee to accept art to be hung in the building. And they went to people in the community who actually know a little bit about art in order to do it. And I think this is modeled on the same idea, trying to get a committee of people who have some understanding about what is intrinsically good or bad in art, other than having someone like me say, God, what on earth is this? And then having someone who understands and saying, hey, this is a real work of art. It ought to be hung in the building. So I think having a municipal liaison is probably worthwhile. I'm not, unless we start electing people who majored in art history rather than engineering, or in fine arts rather than engineering, or like me, I think it's probably a bad idea to have somebody with an engineering background who can only draw straight lines with the aid of a T-square.
I think it's a good idea for the person, Leah's
So,
voting.
yes, I'll make the recommendation of under number 2 to say, and 3 non-voting members, including the municipal administrator or designee, the director of public works or designee, congratulations, Bob, and a member of the governing body. Okay?
That's good.
Okay. Did you get that, Kathy? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Any other suggestions on this one? Can somebody make a motion again as amended? Moved by Mr. Miller.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Butler. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.